What's up everyone? In this video, I'm going to show you 3 simple custom functions I made designed to get data from your file explorer or folder paths. The first function I made is called getFileNames, and this is used to get a list of all file names that appear in one or more folders. The second function I made is called countFileByTypes, and this function counts the number of each file extension that appears for each folder. And finally, the last function that I made is called file exists in folders, which is used to check if a user inputted file exists in one of the folders entered into the function. I'll be showing you all how to use each function in this Excel file and showcase the code for all of them towards the end of the video. So I have 4 worksheets, with the first worksheet containing the folder path location that I'll be using for each function. And if we go to our file explorer here, I have the folder path for thumbnails, which contains all the PNG files for the thumbnails I make for these videos, a folder path for food recipes and steps, which contains a mix of PowerPoints, text files, and Word documents, and one for YouTube sound effects, which contains only 2 files that are MP3 files. Let me show you the first example by going to the worksheet, get all file names from folders. I'm going to type out equals to get file names, and this function only takes in one argument, which is the folder path. But the neat thing about this function is that you can take in more than one folder paths. So let's choose only one folder paths, which is going to be in cell A1 here with my thumbnails, and press enter. And I get a list of all the thumbnails that appear in that specific folder path. And let's see how many thumbnails there are, which is about 29, as it stops at row 29 here. So I'm going to highlight this row. Well, I'm going to highlight row 30 here to show that if I choose more than one folder path, then the data will get past row 30. So let's choose another argument. Instead of just folder path in cell A1, let's also do comma, the folder path location in cell A2, which is the YouTube sound effects. So if I press enter and go down, we get these 2 new values added to the row now. And let's do the last one as well, comma, go to folder paths and choose cell A3 for the food recipes and steps, press enter. And we get all the file names from those 3 folder paths that I referenced before. So the way this function works is that it only takes in one argument, but this argument you can use up to like 30 times. And let's say that you tried referencing a folder path that doesn't exist. You made a typo here. You forgot to include the S in the cell here. If I press enter and I go back to this worksheet, the function basically skipped that folder path since like it doesn't exist, and it only outputted the results for the last 2 folders instead. One thing I do want to mention is that this function doesn't work for when you enter a range of cells all at once. So let me delete the arguments here and go back to the folder paths worksheet, and I'm going to reference range of the cells from A1 to A3 all at once. And if I press enter, I get a type mismatch error. This function will only work if you enter each cell one at a time separated by comma, or like enter any other values besides a range of cells. What happens if all of your arguments are references to folders that don't exist? If we go back to folder paths again, we deleted the S here to showcase what happens when we enter a folder that doesn't exist, but we also included these 2 folders that do exist. So let's go back, and if I just change this to cell A1 only and press enter, we get a no files found message instead. And you don't have to reference a cell directly either. What you can do is that you can also copy the folder path here directly and paste it here in quotes. And I'm going to add back the S to reference the correct folder path, press enter, and we get the list of files again. So you can enter the arguments as a text here, or even like any other data type that's not a range of cell, like let's do numbers here, or any like random value here, and press enter, and we still get back the same output. Up next, we're going to count each file by type, but before I do that, I'm going to go back to folder paths worksheet and just fix the typo that I originally made. So I'm going to add back the S to reference the correct folder path. And now I'm going to go to this worksheet, count by file types. I'm going to type out equals to count files by type. And this function, the way you would enter the argument is exactly the same as the previous function I showed you. You would enter each individual folder path separated by comma, and the function will create an output of the file extension in one column, and in the next column, a count of how many times these file extensions appear. So I'm going to reference the first folder path again here, and I'm just going to close this function out now, press enter, and we get a summary of the file extensions, which is only PNG files, and there's 29 PNG files in that folder. So let's do another folder, comma, and reference cell A2, enter, and we get the next row shows how many times MP3 appears, which is 2 times, and we can finally do the last one in the cell A1, so comma, reference the last folder, and press enter, and we get all the file extensions or the file types are appearing in these 3 folders now, and a count of how many times they appear. Finally, we can move on to the last function, which checks to see if a file exists in any of the folder paths given. I'm going to go to this worksheet here, and in cell A1, I'm going to type out equals to file exists in folder, press tab, and this function takes in 2 arguments. The first argument being the file that you're trying to locate, and this can be in the form of a string or text, and the second argument are the folder paths that you're trying to reference. You can reference multiple folder paths separated by a comma, as long as they're not arranged, just like before. For the first argument here, I'm going to go to this worksheet, and I'm going to reference the very first value here, automate word with Excel and mail merge thumbnail.png, and do a comma. And I'm just going to go back to the first worksheet for the folder paths and reference each individual cells and close this out and press enter. And the function returned back true because this file here is located in the first folder. If we go to this file, automate word with Excel and mail merge thumbnail, it's located in this folder that's specifically for thumbnails. So let's say that we deleted this folder, right? If we deleted the folder that's found in cell A1 and we only included the last 2 folders which don't contain any like thumbnail images, if I press enter, well, I'm going to get back a value error. That's because I forgot to delete this here. And if I press enter again, I'm going to get back false because this file, the thumbnail file, or like the PNG file, isn't located in either of these folders. Now that we're done going over all the functions, let's go over the code behind each of them. I'm going to press Alt F11. We have the function, the first function, get file names, with 1 argument for folder paths, and the param array keyword here allows me to like input multiple folder paths into the function, and this function will return a variant or like any data type, particularly like an array type. I have here this UDF will retrieve a list of file names from 1 or more folder paths. I have the variables used to create the file system objects and everything associated with it. And if I scroll down, I'm turning on the error handler here. And in this section of the code, I'm going to loop through each folder path. Well, I'm going to loop through each folder path in the arguments. And then within each folder path that's being looped, I'm going to check for all the files in that folder path and then store the data from each file into this array here called file names. And we'll store the name of the file into the array file names. And if the file count is greater than 0, or like if there's like if there's more than 0 files in that array, I'm going to transpose the array and store it into the function name get file names. Otherwise, I'm going to return the array of no files found. And towards the end of the code, I'm going to set the object variables back to nothing, reset everything, and exit the function assuming no errors. But if there was an error, then it would go to the error handler line here that's used to like handle any errors, and it would output the array of like the error and the error description, and then reset all the objects back to nothing again. The next function, count files by type, has the same keyword param array, and it's gonna output the result as a variant or like an array. The same thing is going on as before. I'm gonna declare all the objects related to the file system object and keep track of the files being looped. And then I'm gonna turn on error handling and also like reference the dictionary object within the Microsoft scripting runtime library. I'm gonna loop through each folder path in the arguments, and within each folder path, I'm gonna loop through each file, and I'm gonna check to see what the file extension is for each file, and store the file extension into the dictionary object. If the file extension doesn't exist, or like the keyword doesn't exist, then it's going to add the file extension to the dictionary object and store the item variable as 1. And the same extension appears again. It's going to increment the item value again by 1. And when the looping is all done, it's going to resize the two-dimensional result array to store the key values from the dictionary and the item values from the dictionary, and it's going to loop through each key and just like store all the values in that array. And then once that's done, it's going to store the result array into the count files by type function here, and then reset all the object variables back to nothing. And assuming that like there's no error, just exit the function. If there was an error, then we would go to the error handler line here. It would tell us what the error is, well, the description of the error, and reset the object variable to nothing. For the function file exists in folder, we have the two arguments here, file name as string and param array folder paths as variant, and we're going to return a boolean value here. This UDF will check to see if a specific file name exists in one or more folder paths, and we have the object declarations here. Create the object for the FSO file system object by referencing the scripting runtime library. Loop through each folder path that's represented as arguments, and within each folder path, loop through each file. Check to see if the file matches with the string variable that you inputted as the first argument, and if the string variable matches, then it's going to set file exists in folder equal to true, and reset all the object variables, and then exit the function. But if nothing matched, then it's going to continue looping and move on to this line of code, where if there were no files found in each folder path, then the output would be false, and we would reset the object variables again to nothing. That's pretty much it for the 3 custom functions used to retrieve file data from the File Explorer. If you want to use the 3 functions, then you can see them in the description below. If you also want to see another function I made before that uses SQL, then definitely check out this video where I show you all how to use a SQL function to retrieve data from opened or closed Excel workbooks. If you guys found this video to be helpful, then please like and comment down below what else you'd want to see. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Until then, I'll see you guys next time.